As more countries seek employment flexibility and globalization destabilizes traditional employment patterns, more workers are likely to face involuntary termination of employment at some point in their professional lifetime. Talking about labor law is essential at this time, as it will help educate people in general as the flexibility to reduce staff and dismiss unsatisfactory workers is a necessary measure for employers to keep enterprises productive. That's according to International Labour Organization. Hello and welcome to Let's Talk on DNTWOK. My name is Olujoke Musaku, and my guest is Barrister Kayode Ajulo, lawyer and civil rights activist. We are discussing lack of international labor law. Thank you once again for joining us on the show this week, and I'm glad to always have you. But before we delve into the program proper, I'd like to remind you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on all of our social media platforms. Until then, enjoy the ride with us. Thank you so much, Barrister, for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. So what is international labor law?
When we talk of international labor law, and let me start by saying this to start with, that I've listened to your introductory remark, and I must commend you for the research and for your thoughtfulness. But I noticed that the last mention, you talked about maybe there's a lack of international labor law in basically Nigeria. I want to believe that is not. If you say the labor law, if you say the best practice or standard, then we can agree with that. But to go on to say the labor law in Nigeria, there is lack of international labor law, there is not. Why I say that is this: when we talk of international labor law, the only way, the entities we can use and the organization that we can use to know what it is, because each state, each country, each entity has its different law, but the basic major international one is the one as stipulated as being governed and regulated by ILO, that is International Labour Organization. An International Labour Organization has come with different regulation, different provision, different protocols. So, and what every state have been trying to do now is to make sure that they are in tandem, they are in terms with those standards. That's what we call it, international labor standard, a best practice. I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yes,
so
I didn't mention Nigeria. I was talking about
generally.
Yes, it's according to
generally.
International Labour Organization that it is necessary for them to actually reduce workforce as a result of some basic necessities and all, to ensure that enterprises are productive.
Yes, exactly. I think I now pick it now. Now, for what you asked about international labor law, I don't think there is one standard international labor law than the major standard, as like I mentioned, has been governed, maintained, regulated by the ILO, that's international labor law. Because as it is, every state, every country has its own sovereignty. They have their municipal law, but the only thing is that they are most of the time signatories to some standard law, international law, and practice that they ratify. Like Nigerian ratify, like the way Nigeria always ratifies some international law, treaties, agreement, the same way they ratify all the treaties, all what is coming from the ILO. So the essence of it is that any law that is being made, they try as much as possible to go and to be in compliance with that general and international practice.
Okay. Now that more countries seek employment flexibility and globalization, are there standards to these things?
Yes, I think let's start with this fact, and I think we continue to use Nigeria because I'm in Nigeria. I practice in Nigeria as what I will use to reflect or what my submission would be. like we have to understand that, like every other human endeavors, relationships, when it comes to employment, work as employee, it is more of an understanding, addendum. And that's why any form of ad contract, what matter most addendum that we agree. And that is the way it always is. But because of the fact that I think some laws has really recognized the fact that they recognize the fact that most of this agreement is always between the stronger and weaker entity. They always bring some practice, some understanding, and some regulation that we always believe that that agreement was conformed with. And most of the time, most of these agreements are as the two parties agreed, but having in mind that they must work towards some laws and some things that they can use as yardstick. And that's what is. So that is the issue. And that is the most, so the essence of most of this law is to always work towards having the best and the best of practice.
Okay, so what is the importance of international labor law or standards and its effect on employees?
The importance of it on employees to help them, like I told you, the labor contract, employment contract, workers' contracts, and their employers are always canvassed, and I always stated that it is not it is like having two entities. One is stronger than another. You find out that employers always seem to be in a better position, better standing than the employees. And that is why this international law, the standard and best practice is to help to safeguard the employees. And that's why it is so important to them, because there are many issues, and we're going to talk about employment contract itself. You find out that although by our law, that's our labor law, section 7 talks about once you are employed within three months, there must be a contract of employment. But the question is that how many people, how many agreement of that can we have? Whereas in some other countries like in United Kingdom, Japan, and co, it is compulsory. Despite the fact that the Nigeria is compulsory, and the law even stipulates that failure to provide that employment contract, failure to give your employees employment contract, there will be a need for you to be paying a penalty of 2,000 naira every month. The question is that how many people have been made to pay such amount? Because the question is how many of such employees we have the dear with that, we have this political will and strong will and the money to even approach the authority to reverse such kind of infraction. And this is always the major problem. The employees, they don't have much bargaining power. They don't have money because they are not well remunerated to even challenge most of this. But when we now have all these ILO standard and international standard and best practice, it can help in some ways to give like a compass, to give like a guidance, to know what to be done when it comes to that. Even another issue is this working hours. You find out that international practice, it has outlawed this overtime. Even if there must be overtime, you must give adequate notice. There are some things, some procedure that must be followed, condition precedent. But in some places, employers can just lord over any employee and say you must work from so time to so time. The fear is there that if I did not work, I will find myself out of the job. And employment rate is so high to now the fear of going back to employment market is another problem. And even if you want to ask for redress, you have the money to call on the lawyer to do all this.
So that's why people take all of the nonsense, if I may use that word, that is being thrown at them.
I want exactly. First, we are talking of knowledge. We are talking of to be learned and to know what to do, what to challenge and what not to challenge. Finally, the bargaining power, the herewith their resources. Can anybody of this employee, can they commit their resources to such endeavors? That is one of the problems, and that's one of the issues. And that's why you find out that, like I did a research recently, I wrote a paper on constructive dismissal and what is called constructive dismissal. You find out that constructive dismissal is not when somebody will say, leave my work, but in a way where an employer has made the workplace not conducive for you, that will make an employee to leave the work or to resign. That is constructive dismissal. And I did all those interviews, about 100 people interview. You find out that only 17, most of them, almost about 68 are aware of this constructive dismissal. The question is how many of them have been able to ask for reversal of that. You find out that despite being aware, most of them cannot ask for the reversal. And when you try to find out why, you find out that it is basically because of lack of knowledge. Even let's say they are even aware, the issue is there with that. Do they have money? Can they even go to court, or can they even approach lawyer? First is two things: the money to be paid and their belief in the judicial system of the land. Those are the major issues that is stifling such things.
Thank you so much, sir. Let's quickly go on this break. We will be right back. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, the program is Let's Talk on DNTWOK. I've been speaking with Barrister Kayode Ajulo, and as we were discussing, he said this labor law is actually for employees, but because most employees do not or does not know their rights, they fall victim of unconducive working environment. So if you want to learn more, continue with us as we go on this ride. Thank you, Barrister, for standing by. It's nice having you once again. So do you know of countries? Yes, you mention of something I was going to ask right now. I am going to ask right now. Now, do you know of countries that have unfair practices, and what do you think can be done to help change the trajectory?
Well, like I mentioned some minutes ago, the country that I know is where I am here in Nigeria, because there are a lot of unfair practice here, and this cannot be divorced with the way the country is from the way the country is, the composition of issues, social, cultural, political, and legal issue in the country. For example, I mentioned the fact that the employment rate is high, unemployment rate is high, the fear of being thrown into that market is one of the problems. And I mentioned the issue of the knowledge, that can the employee go all out to fight their... First thing is that did they even know they are right? They even know what is expected of them, what they need to be done at the right time. Even apart from that, those that seem to know they are right, what have they been able to do? Can they approach legal practitioners for the dress? That is another problem. And finally, what is their belief, what they think, their interpretation and their understanding of the judiciary and judicial justice delivery system in Nigeria? You know, all these things seem to have already caused this major issue. Unlike in other countries where employment rate is not as high, if you leave this job today, you can pick another one tomorrow. That is one. And apart from that, they have some other mechanism. There are some other laws and non-governmental organization, non-profit organization that are always there to assist workers find redress. Those are the things that mitigate and to not that palatable for workers when it comes to issue of redress. And once there's no redress, you know that this infamy, this bad practice, this exploitation and all will just continue.
Okay, in light of that, what are the challenges facing international labor law in general, and where it is lacking? What could go wrong?
Well, that is the basic one. And again, I think we have to understand that where this thing is very prevalent is in developing country. In fully developed country, there are a lot of laws and regulation that's binding. But in a situation that in all these developing country, you've all third world country, you find out that it is he who has money that have a say, and you know that employer is like a master-servant relationship. And where masters has all the money, how will the servant be able to challenge this? The master is an issue. And even in fact, if I must say it clearly, it is not even the master servant. It's more like slave. It's like it's in slavery in another way, the way it is in third world country. And that is why the employment law of those third world country and developing country, they are not in tandem with the international standard and best practice.
Thank you so much for that. Any final word as we round up?
Well, the final word here is this: the ILO, we must be commended. They have tried so much to ensure that workers have the best bargain. Even I know what they've done in Nigeria, particularly one of their contribution, one way or the other, covertly and overtly, is to ensure that we have in this country industrial courts where most of this worker relation, any trade dispute can be resolved. And before, industrial court is not one of the constitution, is not backed by constitution, but as it is now, we have a full-fledged court and judicial officer to do that. That is one. And there's several trainings and try to strengthen the labor unions and co. But unfortunately, the labor unions are not as strong as what they have been. And I think, and the more we have such engagement, the way we try as much as possible to reverse the trend and to ensure that the workers, they have the best bargain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Once again, I would like to appreciate your presence.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
And to you out there, thank you too for being part of the show. But remember, as a worker, you need to keep developing yourself so that you will remain relevant. Until next time when I come your way again, I remain Ajulo. Bye for now.